Let's talk about Haider Ackermann, who is now the creative director of Tom Ford. So Haider Ackermann, for people that don't know, is a Colombian designer. Growing up, he did move to many different countries after he was adopted. So he's lived in countries like Algeria, Ethiopia, Iran, and he eventually settled in the Netherlands. Why that is very important is a very interesting part of Haider Ackermann's work and something that really interests me. This really good sensibility in terms of mixing different textures and taking cultural dress from a certain culture and making that turning it into his own thing and sort of modernizing them through his own lens, right? And that's something that I've always loved. I think also his really interesting use of color and how he layers and how he styles things is also very much influenced by the different ways that he experienced things when he lived in different countries growing up. So yeah, very, very important thing. Of course, right now he's creative director of Tom Ford as well as the creative director of Canada Goose. Actually, it's funny because when he was announced as the creative director of Canada Goose, something that all of us were saying in the live stream is Haider Ackermann's talent is a bit, further than Canada Goose, but reading interviews, it's actually something that he wanted. It's something that he has described as, being around nature has allowed him to center himself and has really allowed him to, think about things, think about ideas and kind of have a refreshed mindset. So I think going into Tom Ford, that was actually the best thing for him. Also, something else that he's done recently is the guest collection that he did at Jean Paul Gaultier for the couture collection that a lot of people loved, because people have just been yearning for Haider Ackermann to find a home. It's been very difficult since his eponymous label closed. Of course, a lot of people refer back to his time at Baluti as a time where he did very interesting things. It was a time when he really made Baluti not just known for clothes more known for clothing than it is known for, which is like men's footwear and stuff like that. So people are really yearning back to seeing the Haider Ackermann tailoring, which is why when he was announced as creative director of Tom Ford, a lot of people were, of course, excited. So was I, to be honest. So like I said, Haider Ackermann is known very much for the way that he layers clothes, the way that he uses cultural dress and kind of makes them his own things, and he mixes them, the way he mixes textures and different fabrics, his use of color. A lot of times he uses like very pastel colors and stuff, but then sometimes he mixes that with very deep dark colors. Like there were years when he would use a lot of black, design things with a lot of leather. So yeah, that's very interesting. And I do think that in his Tom Ford debut, he definitely brought all of those elements present in this collection. Anyway, talking about Tom Ford, because I really want to talk about how exactly did we get here where Haider Ackermann has become the creative director of Tom Ford, before we even talk about, his work at Tom Ford, right? So Tom Ford actually sold his brand to Estee Lauder in 2022, exited the company the following year and essentially retired from fashion. He then appointed Hawkins, who was someone who had become who was basically his right hand and had been with him for many, many years to be the creative director. That didn't last. After one season, he left the brand. There were, murmurings of the fact that Tom Ford didn't really like his vision of Tom Ford, and everyone, when they think of Tom Ford, they think of sexy. That is definitely the case with Haider Ackermann too, and the big focus in this collection. However, Tom Ford apparently did not like his version of sexy, or what his idea of Tom Ford's sexy was. So they decided to part ways after just one season, which left an opening that Haider Ackermann could fill. I think it's also very interesting to note kind of the business side of Tom Ford, how it exists. So yes, Elord owns the brand, and one of the big reasons why they wanted to own the brand is Tom Ford has a very strong beauty line. They sell a lot of fragrances. I mean, Tom Ford fragrances at this point are supremely iconic, but the fashion is actually licensed out to Xenia Group. So Xenia Group is the group that's actually running the fashion side, and I believe the licensing deal is for 20 years. And that's very important because something I love about Xenia is they have a lot of innovation when it comes to fabrics. They are on top of the game when it comes to fabrics. And if they can, bring that expertise to Tom Ford, that can only be a good thing. Where in terms of talking about why they wanted to hire Haider Ackermann, to read a statement specifically from the CEO of Xenia Group, he said, "For Tom Ford, we appointed Haider Ackermann as creative director in order to bring the brand to its full potential." Now, what they mean by this, by bringing the brand to its full potential, is women's wear. They have been trying to build the Tom Ford's women's wear for a while now, and they've struggled. Tom Ford is very much known for the suits, for the tuxedos, for, the footwear, for the fragrances, but the women's wear just hasn't really in droves hit the way the men's wear is hitting. And they need someone that can really bring that expertise on the women's wear side to grow the women's wear business. So that was something that they cited as a big reason why they wanted Haider Ackermann to be at Tom Ford, which I think is definitely a job that he can do expertly. We also have some shows that Haider Ackermann referenced, talking about his favorite shows that Tom Ford has done. So he referenced Gucci Fall Winter 96, which was one of his earlier Gucci shows, which really brought our ideas of kind of what we associate with Tom Ford. And it was very transformative in the sense that, this vision of sexiness and jet set lifestyle that we associate with Tom Ford, those were the building blocks of that time, right? He also referenced Saint Laurent Paris, Fall Winter 01, and Tom Ford, Fall Winter 11. So these are shows that you can have in mind, because Haider Ackermann said in interviews that he didn't necessarily want to directly reference Tom Ford in the sense of referencing certain looks, but he wanted to reference Tom Ford in the sense of a sensibility, an idea, and understanding what is sexiness. Questions like this: what is a jet set lifestyle? But how do you bring that into the modern day in 2025? And how do you represent that in a Haider Ackermann way? So that is something that I also enjoyed from the mindset and the perspective that he was looking at the show from. But anyway, what we should really do now is read the show notes, because I think he kind of states his intention for the show. So I think before watching the show, it's very important that we read the show notes, because I think you have a good sense of what he was going for in terms of that. So here are the show notes of the collection. So let's read it. A beginning is a new dance. You start by looking at your partner, acknowledging differences, exploring similarities, trying to find ways to match each other's steps and move harmoniously. Entering the house that Mr. Tom Ford built, I was drawn to the man himself, whose personality reverberates through everything he envisioned. He is nightlife and I am the morning after. Now let's pause there. This idea of, Tom Ford is nightlife and I'm the morning after, it makes a lot of sense, because Tom Ford's sexiness is very different to when Haider Ackermann does do sexiness. They're not the same. Tom Ford very much sometimes likes to show skin. It's very on the nose. I mean, when we think of Tom Ford, you might think of clubbing and you think of, people having fun, sometimes with certain drugs that we shall not name, and that sort of lifestyle and people going on private jet. That's kind of the association I have in my head when you think of Tom Ford. And it's very interesting that Haider Ackermann describes his stuff as I am the morning after. When you're having murmurings of the night that happened before, the way that you dress, is kind of what Haider Ackermann is going for, rather than the ultra club-like nightlife sexiness that Tom Ford very much portrayed with a lot of his collections in the past. But anyway, reading on. Private rooms in clubs are mysterious places where things happened that not everyone can access. That unattainability is a distance that charms, fueling desire. Tom Ford is a world of desire. It lures and seduces. So once again, we have an understanding that Haider Ackermann is really going for this idea of seduction, sexiness, saying Tom Ford is a world of desire. It lures and seduces. And sexiness, seduction, luring, that really was the central theme of the collection. That was one of the big focuses. In interviews, that was the main thing that he was talking about. And of course, in show notes, that has also been made very clear. Let's see what his definition of seduction is. To seduce means to bring someone close, drawing a gaze, enticing touch, stimulating senses, rewarding discovery with surprise and beauty. Sensuality is the feeling of beauty. I welcome my beauties here. The noble personalities embodying my idea of what makes an individual today. Their androgyny brings alive the vertical directness of what they wear, the ease of pure lines empowered by the full blast of color. Colors of joy. Bright pastels are fresh and uplifting on suits and dresses, as immediate as t-shirts, vivid hues that also glisten on the eyes as powdery eyeshadows. Now, there's a lot there, but these are all kind of concepts in the collection. The beauty is something that I will talk about when we look at the runway show, because I think it's actually quite interesting to talk about the makeup. But they did use powdery eyeshadows actually on the models, so that's what they're referencing there. Of course, the bright pastels is something that Haider Ackermann is known for. He's brought it to many different places, even at Berluti, at his eponymous label. And so bringing that to Tom Ford, when Tom Ford is not necessarily known for using a lot of pastel colors, is something that's very Haider Ackermann. And that's why he's mixing Tom Ford's sensibilities with staples that we have grown to love from Haider Ackermann himself. So that's kind of what he's talking about anyway. Grey and full black stay because they are in the personality of this house. Yes, exactly. Very much Tom Ford likes to use black. He likes to use grey. I mean, when you think of the typical Tom Ford wardrobe, he himself wears a lot of black, whether it's a black leather jacket or, you know, a black suit. And it's funny because the opening looks in the Tom Ford Haider Ackermann debut it just reminded me of Tom Ford's personal style. And once again, like Haider Ackermann talked about this idea of trying to push forward the sensibilities of Tom Ford rather than specifically referencing a certain look. And I could definitely see that with all the leather jackets that were at the start of the runway show. So yeah, I definitely saw that. But going back to the show notes, there is dignity and pureness in taking away rather than decorating, in turning decoration into architectural shapes that complement or neatly accessorize the body. A T runs on heels, jewels, belts, like a hidden message. I don't really think the message was that hidden, to be honest. But that was, you know, an ode to the T in Tom Ford. So when you look at a lot of the belts or the jewels, or even the way that the straps are designed on the heels, you guys will notice that it forms a letter T, which is an ode to the brand. But yeah, I don't think it was a hidden message. I think it was quite obvious to see. The morning after all that's unnecessary has been left behind, which is once again what he said he describes himself as. You know, Tom Ford is the nightlife and I'm the morning after. So he's further reiterating that the morning after all that's unnecessary has been left behind is where you really start to see this clothing. So let's see what he says. The last sentence: what remains is feelings, impressions, and lips bleeding red that have been kissed for the whole night. Now, I wasn't actually, because this is the first time I'm reading the show notes, because I didn't want it to affect my understanding of the collection. But interesting, because if you guys notice, a lot of the models were wearing like a bright red lipstick, which of course goes into the concept of seduction, right? When you go on Mac's website, and I've brought this up just so that you guys can see, like red lipstick is, you know, normally associated with seduction. It's seen as something that's attractive to, you know, the opposite sex most of the times. You know, when they've done research, they've seen, scientists have found that red lipstick draws attention to the mouth, most notably from the opposite sex. Red lipstick has always been associated with power and strength, making it an attractive color to wear. It is seen as bold, feminine, yet daring, and a powerful color. So it's very interesting that Haider went for that color. That's kind of the concept behind the beauty and the lipstick and all that sort of stuff. So guys, let's look at the runway show. I'm sure that's what all of you are waiting for. So first of all, something that I will say I did appreciate when it comes to the runway show is that the models were walking really slowly, because it's so hard, and I talk about this all the time, to really focus on the clothing and really, you know, actually see what's being presented on the runway when the models are flying by and damn near fast walking to the end of the runway. So there's not really time to take in the garments. So I did appreciate the tone and the speed that the models are walking in, because it really gave us a chance to see what we were looking at. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. In the earlier looks, we get a lot of leather, which is a very Tom Ford thing. Tom Ford is, you know, known for not only just using black as a color and focusing really on that and having a very monochromatic palette, but also wearing a lot of leather jackets, right? It's a lot in his personal style. We then get a mixture of the Haider Ackermann sensibilities and shapes and silhouette, which we know Haider Ackermann to do. Some of these overcoats actually remind me of a modernized version of what Haider Ackermann did at Berluti. Because when Haider Ackermann was at Berluti, he did similar overcoats, but they weren't as baggy in silhouette. And that is just kind of, I think, a sign of the times, where everything is becoming a bit wider, silhouette-wise. So yeah, this thing, I saw a lot of people on social media talking about it. Let me pause it there. This sort of crossing of the arms around the body, in a sense, making it romantic. Now, what this really reminds me of, actually, is Meister. Of course, a lot of designers have kind of done this already. And it's funny that when I was looking at the discourse online, not many people really referred to that. But, you know, for example, this is Meister Spring Summer 2003. This is also something that Ludovic de Saint-Saëns referenced himself in the one collection that he did do at Andre Lemaister that sent people into a frenzy. But yeah, it's a way that, you know, designers try to show like a certain level of romance and fragility and stuff. But it's an idea that I definitely have seen over and over and over again. Like, so many designers have definitely done that for sure. Talking about the set is actually really, really interesting. You can see like mirrors, and, you know, there's like fingerprint smudges and different graffitied suggestions that I can't really see close up, but I'm very sure that there's probably words written there, right? And that are sort of an ode to, you know, being in a club and being sexy, because the whole theme of the set is supposed to mimic like a club, right? They're supposed to transport you into a club, which is an ode to Haider Ackermann's past, but also Tom Ford's past. Tom Ford is very known for being very involved in the New York clubbing scene. When you think of things, you know, famous spots like Studio 54, at least in the 70s, was very much one of the hubs for the disco club scene in New York. You have all these famous pictures with the likes of Andy Warhol, who was a regular, and stuff like that. And Haider Ackermann has kind of revamped this idea, but through his own personal lens, right? So when Haider was growing up, he talked about in an interview in BOF, which was really interesting, how when he was growing up in Antwerp's red light district, he would have a lot of experience around the nightclubs, where he would obviously go to the nightclub sometimes, but also after, in his childhood, you would see like a lot of people that worked in the clubs or went to the clubs talking about their experience the night after. So it's very, very interesting how he's kind of transformed this Tom Ford idea and made it his own in a way, and reference his own experiences of clubs and the day after the club. Kanye B says, Tuba Avalon's new video spoke on the rise of futurism in today's fashion. Some of the looks really tap into that. Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. For sure. It made me think of a steamed up mirror when you've taken a shower and need to make a fast exit. Yeah, I like that idea too. I wasn't thinking about that, but to be honest, I think that's actually a really good take. That's a really, really good take. Something that it also reminded me of, because obviously in the show notes, they talk about this idea of, you know, after you've been kissing throughout the night, in the night after, you have red lips because the red lipstick from all the people you've been kissing has rubbed off on your lips, right? The really light makeup, there's an actual direct reference. Let me actually show you guys, because Vogue actually did cover it, which was really nice. So let me just show you guys quickly, and then I'll tell you kind of what it reminded me of personally. So of course they talk about how seduction was a big focus of the collection. We've kind of talked about this already, and how like one of his big focuses was, you know, it being sexy and him seducing through the clothing. And to further illustrate this sensual state of mind, one of the beauty muses in his mind was Tippi Hedren and Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, which kind of informed some of the way that the beauty looks were. Here's a reference for you guys if you guys want to see it visually, which I found interesting because to me personally, when I see really bright, really white foundation, like ghost white foundation, and it's a collection about, you know, sexuality and, you know, seduction and stuff like clubbing, it honestly reminds me of when people go to the club and you're kissing and someone's really light foundation rubs off on your face. So when you leave the club, you have like a really bright face. It's more prominent like for black people, right? We normally make, in the black community, we make fun of guys who like spend the night kissing white girls, and then when they leave the club, their face is just like really white, right? It's hilarious. It looks funny. So that was something that really came to mind in terms of like this like really, really light shade of, you know, white foundation. So that was like a thought. I wonder if like that was an idea that Haider Ackermann had when he was thinking about the collection. But yeah, I found it really, really funny. But let's continue looking at the show, guys. He said, Leo said I went there. Luke is saying, Tom Ford is more fun than this. Like, God, where are the party and the drugs? Yeah, but Luke, that's not what Haider Ackermann was going for. And actually, to be honest, if we're going to have, let's have this discussion about, you know, sexiness and all this sort of stuff, right? I did see a conversation online around, is it sexy enough? Like, is it, Haider Ackermann is talking about seduction with this collection. Is he really pushing seduction? First of all, Haider Ackermann is not trying to show you that, you know, a club sort of sexiness. He already said Tom Ford is the night and I am the morning after. He's already said that. So he's made it very clear that we're not the same, in a sense that everything is toned down the day after. I'm not trying to represent, the actual club night, which is more Tom Ford's vibe himself. Here, once again, that shade of purple is something that Haider Ackermann has used over and over again. Like, everyone that loves Haider Ackermann, like I do, would know that. So once again, even down to the colors, Haider Ackermann is bringing down his sensibilities. Here we see an aggressive slit once again, but done in a way that's very subdued. It's sexy, but not too sexy. It's still covering a lot of the skin, even though it's very aggressive. Who's that? Alex Consani modeling that dress. I think anyone upset that it's not sexy enough is clearly someone who needs to see everything all at once and probably last 10 seconds. Oh my God, that's crazy. Why am I wearing a suit? Because we're talking about Tom Ford. And I do think it's sometimes fun to dress in themes based on what show I'm reviewing, but only if I like the brand though. I think the only other time I've actually done it is when I reviewed a Balenciaga collection and they had those like jeans on the head. So yeah, that's why I'm wearing a suit, guys. Let's see. Luke said, if he's admitting himself that their sensibilities are basically in direct conflict, then surely it's not a great match. So I don't really agree with that. I don't agree with that because Tom Ford's job, like, what do you mean by a match? Haider Ackermann's job at Tom Ford is not to copy Tom Ford because that's not interesting at all. I also do think that this idea of sexiness that everyone claims that they're not seeing from Haider Ackermann's Tom Ford, I don't understand it because in recent times, from what I can remember, Tom Ford's sexiness was kind of waning. Like, it wasn't the early Tom Ford collections, whether, we're talking about Gucci, we're talking about Saint Laurent, we're talking about, early Tom Ford, like eponymous label. It's so much sexier than the latter stages of like Tom Ford, close to when he retired, right? So I don't like this sexiness that everyone is begging from Tom Ford. Tom Ford himself wasn't even doing that. So I think it's actually crazy that that's what people expect. And he's done it in different ways. Like there you saw kind of like a tuxedo, which is something that Tom Ford is very much known for, but a bare-chested tuxedo. That's where a lot of the sexiness is coming once again. People wearing these suits, but they're not wearing undershirts and stuff like that. So it's a very, very subdued way of doing sexiness through Haider Ackermann's vision. Elle says, like, there's sexy, then there's like grown and sexy. Yeah, for sure. For sure. This collection gives power, and power will always relate to sexiness. True. This is the day after partying for barristers. And damn you, I totally agree with you, by the way, that people are calling Tom Ford drier in the late 2000s. Facts. Sexiness can manifest in ways that aren't just having your titties out, and often the party vibe of Tom manifested in these campy, burlesque vibes that I never cared. I'm with you there. I'm with you. It's just sexiness in a different way. I think it doesn't have to be through the lens of Tom Ford, which is why that was something that I really enjoyed about this collection, actually. That, he's doing sexiness, but in a different way. It's more like covering the skin. It's more about seduction in a silhouette, but also the sensibilities of the models, the way they're walking slowly. They're walking with an attitude. That is kind of what I was enjoying in terms of sexiness from this collection. So once again, that was the big question, right? Like, is this sexy enough? Is this Tom Ford sexy? That was a concept that I saw thrown around a lot. But I personally think it was. Culture says these sequin suits were probably my favorites on the runway. Interesting. I don't know. I like the tuxedos the most because tuxedos are, first of all, when we think of Tom Ford and what Tom Ford is in the modern day, right, in 2025, or even recently in 2024, Tom Ford is mainly known for dressing a lot of men on the red carpet. A lot of men on the red carpet just wear like Tom Ford tuxedos all the time. So Tom Ford, and this goes back to why they hired Haider Ackermann, because they're really trying to build the women's wear side of Tom Ford, because they're already known for the men's wear. They have a cemented place. All the men wear the tuxedos and the suits. All the men wear, the shoes. All the men are buying the perfume. And that's kind of what I enjoyed, because Haider Ackermann was making more like feminine tuxedos and playing with tuxedos in different ways. So he would take a shape of a tuxedo and kind of imbue that into the shape of a dress, or, make lapels and crop the tuxedo to make it more feminine. That was what I really enjoyed in this collection. That was actually, those tuxedo looks were actually my favorite part of the collection. I like the texture on the grey sparkly pieces. Yeah, I think a lot of people are liking the sequin pieces. What you can't see will always be more sexy to me. Yeah. I just think that there's not one way to view sexiness. I think this idea that everything has to be like coked out, club vibes, I just don't agree with that. And I also don't think that in 2025, the general culture or sentiment really allows for that type of sex. I think that kind of sexiness is not what people like most people. That was kind of what people liked in the 90s. That's not really what people like these days. That's not it. So it wouldn't even be modern to have this sort of coked out, lights out, tits out, type of sexiness. Culture says, I always think sexiness can be how something is worn, for sure. And that's one of the things that Haider Ackermann is known for, not just his expert tailoring and his sharp tailoring. It's also actually about how he styles things and how he layers fabrics that people don't usually layer and you wouldn't think should, generically work together, but somehow it works. I was like, lights out, tits. So that's like a British thing to say, lights out, tits out. But yeah, I thought it was an extremely solid debut collection from Haider Ackermann. I'm curious to know, that shade of red, once again, is a really Tom Ford thing. Tom Ford used that shade of red at Gucci. But yeah, I want to know if he's still going to focus on the themes of seduction and stuff, because it's such a Tom Ford thing. However, like he said, he wants to really look at different themes of Tom Ford's life and Tom Ford's sensibilities and kind of make those his own for his time at Tom Ford. So I'm very curious to know what else is left. Oh, really coffee. Let's see what Luke said. God, the entire thing is so stale and clinical. It looks like a shittier version of what Stefano Pilati did at YSL. 5 out of 10 for effort. I don't agree with that. I also think that this is one of the strongest debuts we've seen in a long while, actually, personally. So yeah, I don't agree. I don't think this is stale at all. At all. I don't see what's stale at all. This was also really cute that Haider Ackermann got a standing ovation. I can't remember the last time a designer got a standing ovation like that at a runway show, hugging Tom Ford. Even Anna Wintour joined in the standing ovation. That's nice to see. That was sweet to see. But yeah, guys. Anyway, thoughts and concerns. Did they kiss on the lips? I was just looking at the hug. I didn't actually look at who kissed who, where. I don't know. I'll have to watch it back. Let's see. Did they kiss on the lips? Who knows? It would have been so on theme if they kissed on the lips and Tom Ford had red lipstick and then Haider Ackermann left with redder lips. That would be so on theme. I will say that woman's hairstyle is really giving Eddie in the movie for some of them. Yeah, I also do think that, I think someone in the chat, and I thought that was a really good comment, was asking me if I think film is going to have a big resurgence in fashion. I mean, there was a time when loads of brands were referencing film. I mean, if you think of the times of, Raf Simons, Calvin Klein, and he was referencing American films like Jaws or, Undercover, A Clockwork Orange. And there was a time when it seemed like a lot of designers and brands were making references to really iconic films. Even J.W. Anderson does the same a lot. I hope so. I hope that there's a return to film, because I think that fashion and film go hand in hand. And it's very interesting when designers do look at different films and use that to, as a reference to inspire some of the ideas in that collection. I always think that's very interesting. So yeah, that's definitely something I thought for sure. Oh, okay, culture. So that was me. Maybe because I'm a total newbie, but I don't see what's there to hate. I love the concept. Yeah, I love the concept too. Also, Tudor, because you're saying maybe it's because I'm a total newbie. So fashion is subjective. Obviously, the more educated you are about fashion, the more of an informed opinion you can make, but it's still subjective. So there's no real right and wrong answer in terms of what you should or shouldn't like. Everyone is open to liking or disliking whatever they want. So there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest. So yeah, don't think, if you like something personally, don't think that you shouldn't like it. And if there's something that you shouldn't like personally, then, you don't have to be forced to like it. I love the suit Haider himself is wearing. Yeah, I thought it was quite nice. Let me run that back, see his outfit once again. In typical Tom Ford fashion, an all black look that Haider is wearing himself. Really nice. I'm really curious to see the footwear, because of course I can imagine that Haider Ackermann learnt a lot about footwear design when he was at Berluti, and I can only imagine he's going to take that knowledge and bring it to Tom Ford. I mean, footwear is a very strong category for Tom Ford as a brand anyway, so having Haider Ackermann there could only mean even more positive things in that regard, for sure. Can you discuss some of Haider Ackermann's sensibilities that stood out to you? I noticed the tie over the shoulder. Oh yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at each look on Vogue Runway, like I love to do. So I could just show you like look by look, basically. So that's what we're going to do next. But if you have any general thoughts about the collection before we do this, let me know, guys. I didn't really like the show. I think it was a bit of a recycle, but not well done. A recycle of what? I'm curious, Holly, what you thought it was a recycle of. Culture says Haider is such an adult. I really like that. He gives sincere adulting, for sure. I also adored the shoes. Yeah, I did like the footwear too. Whoever said this was just a continuation of what he did at Jean-Paul Gaultier was absolutely right too. Another fun house, he brought his unwarranted melancholy. Luke! Oh my gosh. Why are you giving Haider such a hard time? That's what Haider does. Like, Haider is not, like, once again, when you think of like Jean-Paul Gaultier, you think of enfance terrible. You think of it. Tom Ford is sexiness, but in a very like clubby, you know, drugs at night kind of way, but cool. Like everyone looks chic while they're doing drugs in a nightclub. That's kind of like the vibe of Tom Ford. You know, everyone's drunk while we go on our private jet. That's the vibe of Tom Ford. When I think of Jean-Paul Gaultier, I just think of like a bunch of really cool misfits, right? When I think of Jean-Paul Gaultier. Haider Ackermann is none of those things. Like, Haider Ackermann is literally none of those things. Haider Ackermann is more like mellow. Haider Ackermann is romantic. He likes to use pastel colors. But he also has like a gothic side to him when he uses like leathers with sharp tailoring. So it's just like Haider Ackermann has completely different sensibilities to Tom Ford or Jean-Paul Gaultier. However, I do think that that's why he's there. Like that, he's not trying to replicate what Jean-Paul Gaultier did in the case of when he did the Jean-Paul Gaultier collection, and he's not trying to replicate, like I've said, the specific Tom Ford sexiness. But why I love this collection, first of all, I think he has successfully mixed the sensibilities. That's where I think he reached something. Luke says, right, they have totally different sensibilities. Exactly my point. I don't agree with you because I know what point you're making. So the point that you're making is essentially that because they have such different sensibilities, in a way it doesn't work, because Haider Ackermann wants to, you know, cover all the models in clothing, and his idea of like seduction is like what you can't see, not what you can see, where Tom Ford is very much like what you can see. I mean, Tom Ford is known for doing pube campaigns and, you know, stuff like that. Everyone's nude. Although, let me show you guys something actually. When I was like doing research, let me show you something that I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's kind of like a contradiction in a way. So something I found really interesting is that on Haider Ackermann's Instagram, look at this picture. Let me show you guys. Let's focus on it. On the left, I don't want to zoom in because I might get demonetized. This picture where obviously the models are nude is so Tom Ford. And so when he was showing, and I guess this is kind of what some people expected. This is why people expected it to be more like Tom Ford specific sexy, because of images like that he was teasing before he actually, you know, showed the collection. That picture there in the top left corner that you guys are looking at is extremely Tom Ford. And that's on Haider Ackermann's page. So, Luke, I'll give you some leeway in saying that, you know, showing images like this that reminds us very much of the Tom Ford campaigns and, you know, a lot of nudity that we associate with a lot of Tom Ford, and then showing an idea of sexiness that is more subdued, pared back, romantic in a Haider Ackermann sensibility, there's definitely, you know, a contradiction there. There definitely is a contradiction there. For sure, because it's almost like teasing a certain idea of what we have of Tom Ford and then showing us something different, which I can definitely agree with, for sure. Wait, he said Show Studio dragged that teaser photo. I haven't seen the Show Studio review, but I will watch it because I saw that. I think Dal Choda was on there, and I love Dal, so I'm a big fan of Dal Choda. So, you know, I'm always gonna watch a Dal Choda review. But yeah, that's funny that they were dragging. What did they say about the photo? What did they say? I'm curious to know what they said. Yeah, the time I talked about that. Yeah, the time when he shaped the Gucci G on a model's pubes for a campaign is still very iconic. Yeah, for sure. But that's kind of when we talk about the sexiness of Gucci. That's what we're referring to, right? These like ultra nude moments and campaigns that, like, if you look here, for example, like this sort of stuff here, obviously that's the famous pube campaign. Like, it was so, like, Tom Ford's sexiness was so, like, it was screaming sex. Like, it was literally screaming sex, especially in like the campaigns and stuff. for sure. Okay, Luke said it was unsexy. They said it was unsexy. Interesting. Head of RCA was there. Okay, that's cool. It's cool to see that Toe Studio had a really nice panel. That's always nice. But yeah, let's go back to the looks. These campaigns are etched into my memory. Yeah, all of us. We can't get away from those campaigns. I've been obsessed with those campaigns since, because when I first got into fashion, that was like, late 2000s, around that time, was when people are talking about, oh my God, remember when this happened? Remember when that happened? Because it wasn't that long ago, right? So yeah, it just reminds me of like a time when I got into fashion. The 95 show made me want to be a designer. That's cool. That's really cool. But anyway, guys, let's look at the look. So leather jacket, once again, this is very Tom Ford. Tom Ford is famous for wearing leather jackets, famous for use of leather because of his own personal style. So that's the Tom Ford thing there. Of course, the strap shape here visually presents a T for Tom Ford. I mean, that's a bit obvious. That will be obvious to most of you, to be honest. So moving on. Also, you can see in the makeup, I kind of told you guys the references already, why red lipstick is associated with seduction. That's why a lot of the models are wearing red lipstick. And I've told you, of course, the reference to the makeup too. And once again, we have a male version of the look, a more boxy version of the leather jacket. Very Tom Ford. Once again, I showed you guys that image of, how Tom Ford likes to dress. I'll show you guys the image again. Once you look at Tom Ford's personal style and you see the kind of jackets he wears normally, and then you go back to this look, it starts to make sense what Haider was going for. Funny enough, something I thought was interesting were these pointy shoes, because Haider Ackermann at his eponymous label very much used to like use these sort of like pointy shoes. The boots were always very pointy. Even at Beluti, he had really pointy boots. So I like that because it was kind of like an ode, very Haider Ackermann, and an ode to, it's very different to what Tom Ford does a lot of the time, because Tom Ford normally has like boxy toe boxes. He uses a lot of boxy toe boxes. When I think of the Tom Ford shoes that a lot of men like to wear, especially with suits, they're very, let me see if I can pull up Tom Ford's website so I can show you guys actually the shoes I'm talking about, because they're very like square toe boxy. So that's a very Haider Ackermann thing. And someone obviously in the chat asked me, where are you seeing the Haider Ackermann sensibility? So this is where it starts, right? Let me show you guys the typical shape of Tom Ford. Exactly. So when I think of Tom Ford, the toe box is always like this. It's always like it has this like flat front here, this like front bit. Whereas Haider Ackermann's is more pointy, which is a more Haider Ackermann shape of boot, right? So when I think of Tom Ford, the boots are always like this. These are the boots that men buy like crazy. Like so many men buy these kind of shoes, right? So yeah, this is the typical Tom Ford shape. And now we're gonna get the Haider Ackermann more pointy boots mixed in. But yeah, so these are the shapes I'm talking about, guys, when I'm referring to what I associate with Tom Ford. Yeah, it's kind of like squared. Yeah, exactly. What's Holly saying? In the 2000s, sexiness was a whole social movement, not just a campaign. Okay, Holly is talking about, the sexiness, and if like Haider Ackermann's Tom Ford is like sexy or sexy enough, I guess, which is a point of contention, it seems, with Haider Ackermann's debut at Tom Ford. But it's interesting. I like that it's created and opened up a discussion. I do like that. I think a sign of good design is when people are actually talking about the clothes, because a lot of times we're talking about like silhouettes of boots and like tuxedos and different eras of tuxedos. A lot of designers, we don't really go this deep on the clothing because they're not that good and they're not really that interesting as designers. So there's nothing to talk about really when it comes to the clothing, but it's nice that with Haider Ackermann we can do that, right? But anyway, that was the first thing that came to mind once again when I saw these like pointy boots. I was like, oh, that's really Haider Ackermann. And then also, because I think one of the reasons why Haider Ackermann like does those kind of pointy boots is like when you think of, certain parts of the Americas, like you even think of like countries like Mexico, you think of countries like Colombia, a lot of people actually wear like pointier boots, right? So I think part of the reason why he uses that silhouette of boot is partially to do with his heritage, but also maybe he just likes dressing that way and wearing boots that look like that. And it's interesting that he's brought it to Tom Ford. I'm curious to know if that would sell. I don't think the Tom Ford customer would wear boots of that silhouette. I don't know if the Tom Ford customer goes to Tom Ford for pointy boots, but it's Haider Ackermann though, and he's going to bring a new audience to the brand, so that might be a reason to buy those boots, or why a lot of people will. If all you want out of the Tom Ford collection is raw sex appeal, no substance, just go enjoy your favorite leader. Shut the fuck up. Damn. Joe is going at all the people in the chat saying that it's not sexy enough. Damn, there's a heated argument in the chat, guys. Anyway, let's look at the clothing, and then I'll address some of the stuff that you guys are saying in the chat. But yeah, once again, the tee, the leather work, once again, we see that. Here's a really nice leather coat. It's interesting the use of sunglasses. Once again, we see the pointy boots. It's interesting the use of sunglasses, because when I think of Tom Ford, I don't think of sunglasses of this style. I think of more like aviators. Like if I think of, let's see if we can get like Tom Ford outfits. Tom Ford outfits. Yeah, like this is what these kind of sunglasses, what I associate more with Tom Ford, like these kind of like aviators. So that's interesting that they've gone more for that style of sunglasses. Those look more futuristic. Yeah, they're more futuristic. These style of sunglasses are more like the style of sunglasses that I'm wearing right now. Interesting choice. I've always felt Tom Ford pulled inspiration from the late 60s to the 70s. This particular Tom Ford show feels like it's channeling what we thought the future would look like in the early aughts. Interesting take. I like that take. That's an interesting take, though. Once again, this is really cool with the accessories. Of course, they've also done the whole T-strap thing in the accessories too, by the way, which was an important thing. You have the jacket taken off. I guess this is also an ode to what Haider Ackermann was saying, like Tom Ford is the night, I'm the morning after. Because, the morning after, it's probably, sunny outside. So you need to take your jacket off. It's no longer cold like it is in the night. So that's a cool like styling tidbit. That's cool. Okay, here again we have some more leather work, the more futuristic sunglasses, the pointy heels. This silhouette here, I'd have to go back and look exactly what Haider Ackermann collection it is, but Haider Ackermann has used this exact silhouette in a past collection, like word for word, bar for bar, look for look. So once again, to the people asking me where the Haider Ackermann sensibility, this is extremely Haider Ackermann, like ultra Haider Ackermann. Let's move on. Okay, the boxy coat. That I kind of talked about that earlier when we were looking at the show. Even the gloves looks very like what he was doing at Beluti. He was doing like coats with gloves. Let me see if I can whip up some of the collections that he did at Beluti. He was at Beluti from 2016 to 2018. Hey, not a fashion journalist for no reason, eh? So let's see Vogue Runway. Let's look at some of the shows just so we can visualize kind of what he was doing at Beluti, because I'm seeing like a similarity there. But yeah, let's look at some of the Beluti collections via Haider Ackermann. This is a collection that lives in my head rent free when it comes to his Beluti. I think the main reason why was because this was like when I like really started to research Haider Ackermann's work was around this time. And so I can't really forget this collection. So yeah, like stuff like this, like coats like this silhouette of a coat. And you can see once again, also it's in leather. So once again, I feel like he's just bringing this to Tom Ford. Of course, Tom Ford is known for the leather work too, but when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that looks very much like what he was doing at Beluti, especially like silhouette-wise. It's just slightly wider because obviously in 2025, people are using wider silhouettes. It's interesting that he didn't bring more of this kind of Haider Ackermann stuff to his like really shiny fabrics that he'd like to use, especially at his eponymous label. Of course, this is for Beluti, but that's like a very Haider Ackermann thing. I'm quite surprised that he didn't use those like silk satin sort of fabrics more in this Tom Ford collection. Interesting choice, but yeah, let's move on. I agree with you. He's used it multiple times, even his muse till this. Winston has worn something similar. You mean Tilda? Here, I talked about this once again, this kind of, I feel like this is a way that designers use where models do that to be really romantic, but it's, as someone that has been covering fashion for a long time, it's just an idea that I've seen time and time again, and I've talked about some of the references, including Andre Meister, who has used that also. So yeah, people want a close-up of the power glove. All right, I'm a man of the people, guys. Here we go. Here's a close-up of the power gloves. This is a very Tom Ford thing too. This like double-breasted dinner jacket sort of thing. Tom Ford does that a lot. And we see Tom Ford looks like double-breasted looks on the red carpet, especially like double-breasted tuxedos. We see that quite a lot. This is kind of, I think, once again, trying to channel The sexiness is kind of like a... So this is interesting. Why I find this thing interesting is because if you think of Tom Ford's Gucci, the way that Tom Ford would style his Gucci is a lot of the women would be wearing trousers slightly below their waistline, so you could see the belts, like the Gucci belts. And that's why, like, you know, in the 2000s, a lot of people used to like tuck their stuff in to show their Gucci belts. That's why that was a thing. I feel like Tom Ford kind of made that a thing, not because he was doing things in that crass of a way, like literally tucking in your shirt to be like, look at me, I have a Gucci belt. But he would kind of have models wear their trousers below their waistline, so you could kind of see the belt. And he's kind of referenced that, I feel like, in a way, but in a strange way. Like, instead of having the belt kind of below the waistline, he's kind of had the belt across, and you can kind of see this section of the model's waist. Interesting, is different. I don't know if I like it. I do prefer Tom Ford's way of doing it in that specific instance, for sure. Okay, here we get the more Tom Ford thing. So this is the very Tom Ford, like, belt below the waistline. This is the more... So I prefer Haider Ackermann's use of the idea here than I do in the prior look, in the previous look. I don't want that to come back, the low rise. Hey, that's what the people were loving back then. That's what the people were loving. The coat with the shirt and tie. With the tie, because I really love wearing ties, but I like ties that are, like, very interesting. The polka dot tie to me is not very interesting. I know Tom Ford sells ties like that, but that's not that very interesting to me. I would like to see more interesting ties from Haider, because Haider is known for textures and using different fabrics, right? I was talking about the Beluti collection and his eponymous label, where he used to do these sort of like satin, silk, shiny looking fabrics. I would buy a tie from Tom Ford if Haider Ackermann made a tie in one of those fabrics, for sure. Because I like collecting ties and like really weird and interesting fabrics. This tie that I'm wearing right now is an Issey Miyake tie, and like a really strange fabric that Issey Miyake used to love to use that I really liked. Micah's wearing a tie that I want to get to, a Bottega Veneta leather tie. So I like interesting stuff. I think that, you know, that's something that Haider Ackermann could definitely focus on in terms of, you know, adding a bit more pizzazz to the collections moving forward. But like I've said, overall, I think it was a great collection, and I loved it personally. Of course, I know that this collection has been splitting hairs in the comments, but that's completely fine. Once again, this like scarf over the neck, another Haider Ackermann thing. We've talked about the silhouette of trousers. We've talked about the pointy boots that are very Haider Ackermann and not really Tom Ford at all, to be honest. And once again, we just have different iterations of what Haider Ackermann was doing. The leather t-shirt, do you guys think that this is going to like be a thing? I wonder what, like, when I see things like that, I'm thinking, is it breathable? Are you going to be dying of sweat under these sort of leather t-shirts? Like, what things have they done to allow for the practicality of a leather t-shirt? It does remind me of a lot of designers these days. They try to make something... It's this idea of, like, I've talked about the vest. There was this season when Chloe, Prada, Bottega Veneta all had a white vest. And there was this idea of, you know, making the ultimate chic vest. Of course, Bottega did theirs in, you know, different fabrics. They had one that was supposed to look like cotton, but actually it was leather. And a lot of different designers were playing with those vests. Nowadays, it seems to be a lot of brands are trying to create the perfect t-shirt and the perfect t-shirt silhouette. We saw at Matteo Blasi's Bottega these kind of leather t-shirts, right? And now we're seeing Haider Ackermann doing this at Tom Ford. But what do you guys think? Do you think that this is something that will hold? And is this something that will, you know, have the staying power to actually, like, people want to wear this? I'm curious to know what you guys think. I like the leather pants, not so much the shirt. The leather looks very supple, though. Interesting. You wear an undershirt. Fair enough. You wear an undershirt under the leather t-shirt. People are saying they don't think anyone's going to buy it. Interesting. Kind of not related, but does Tom Ford and other like it make their shoes for a size 13 US? Can never find nice dress shoes in my size. To be honest, I actually don't know, because I'm a size US 12, I think. Yeah, US 12. And most brands normally stop making shoes at my size. So I'm not actually sure. I'd have to have a look. We can look on our website live. Let's see. Okay, seemingly they're sold out, but it goes up to a size 14. And this is the US website. So it goes up to a US size 14. So yeah, apparently they do. Tom Ford is your brand, apparently. If you're looking for nice dress shoes in your size, they do shoes in your size. But yeah, let's go further with the looks. What do you guys think about the accessories, by the way? I touched on it earlier, but what do you guys think about like these sort of futuristic sunglasses, which I said earlier, I don't really associate with Tom Ford at all. Like, Tom Ford is not really known for wearing sunglasses of that style. He's more like the guy that wears aviators. So normally when you think of a Tom Ford runway and them trying to push sunglasses, you would think that they would put aviators on the runway. So it was interesting that that was the main silhouette that Haider Ackermann used when it came to the sunglasses. But what do you guys think? I've tried doing the skinny belt with a classic coat. Yeah, doesn't work in real life, but it looks good in photos. I think it looks good. I think it just depends on like who. It's just like me, right? Because of my body shape or my body type, it's not everything that's going to look good on me. So, you know, I like the styling. Once again, Haider Ackermann is known for styling. I like the layering. The leather coat with the navy pinstripe suit, with the sort of burgundy with the white polka dots tie, and the white shirts with the light blue. I like that. I like the layering that they've done there. And then, of course, we have the way more pointy silhouette coming from Haider Ackermann. We're just going to speed run these looks because it's kind of more of the same of a lot of the other looks, the same layering, the pinstripe. This shade of red really, really, really reminds me of Tom Ford Gucci, which I'm very sure Haider Ackermann was using as a reference because he didn't want to, you know, directly reference specific looks. However, he's taking these sensibilities, he's taking the Tom Ford colors and, you know, working around those. So yeah, these gloves, once again, this look reminds me of Tom Ford too. The leather gloves with the leather trousers, the bag that a lot of men like to carry, these sort of like big practical leather tote bags. Very wearing sunglasses too, very Tom Ford. Here, let me see what's happening at the waist. Okay, they've used that same technique. Haider has used that same technique that I talked about earlier. I was also wondering if Haider was going to bring some of the cultural ideas from his eponymous label. I referred to it earlier, but something that Haider Ackermann is very famous for is taking, you know, cultural dress from different countries and kind of making them his own. Not his own in the sense that, you know, I own these cultural things, not like that, but in terms of like weaving it into his own design sensibility. So when you look at a lot of the stuff that he used to design at his eponymous label, you see stuff like him changing the silhouette of kimono slightly, you know, stuff like that. But I didn't really see much of that in this collection, which I guess makes sense because Tom Ford is more about tailoring and stuff like that. So that would kind of start to go a bit too far away from what Tom Ford is supposed to be. But I was just curious to see if like he decided to make that decision, but apparently he didn't. Some of the more pastel colors. The robe is like slightly along the lines of like what I was talking about, but not quite. And then Tom Ford also like is known for like, you know, making the luxury robes and stuff like that too, kind of in line with the lifestyle of Tom Ford in general. That sort of jet set lifestyle. The red coat is Anna Wintour. Interesting. Not Bob Roberts saying Office Blue is back. Office Blue is back. Wait, Luke is saying they shall reap the rewards. What are they reaping the rewards of? Oh, Givenchy. Okay. At first thought, I don't really know about that Givenchy collection. Like everything, there were very good pieces, but especially those earlier looks, I was like, you know, I do not associate those kind of looks with Sarah Burton at all. Like, at all. Like, I definitely preferred this to Sarah Burton's Givenchy debut, for sure. Like, definitely for sure. But Sarah Burton's still Sarah Burton. Sarah Burton's a legend. Of course, I will review it, but yeah, just those earlier looks especially, I was like, yeah. I think she warmed into it by the end, though. By the end of her Givenchy debut, I think the looks were really, really good. And she was channeling, like, old, like, Givenchy, which I've kind of talked to you guys about, because if you guys, you know, tune into the streams, I talked about the fact that I visited the Givenchy Atelier and I was showing pictures on the screen. Those were the collections that were designed by the Givenchy team. This was after Matthew Williams left. And the team was really focusing on bringing stuff back to the essence of what Givenchy is, like looking at the 70s logo, bringing that back, using that as the lining of the coats. And I could see that kind of influenced Sarah Burton's ideas, especially at the end. I could just see that when I was looking at the looks. Okay, we have the very high pastels with the sort of this neck thing here. What fabric is that? This fabric looks like the fabric I hate. This is not a knock on like Haider Ackermann, by the way. It's just, see this fabric? This is the kind of fabric where you see this part of this jacket, it will start to go brown really easily. It'll start to discolor really easy, and then before you know it, it's really hard to clean. This is also the kind of fabric that's really hard to clean. I'm not the biggest fan of stuff like that. Like, I like the silhouette and I like the color as a thing, but would I buy something like that? Hell no. Because that's always, that reminds me of those kind of, it looks like those fabrics that it's just so hard to wash and they stain really easily. I'm sure you guys in the chat know what I'm talking about. Okay, this is even the same fabric. I do prefer this color palette, and this sort of like in between blue and purple is something that Haider uses to the nth degree. He's used that at his eponymous label, so that's Haider bringing his own sensibilities to the... In fact, this look really just looks like Haider, to be honest. It doesn't really look very Tom Ford at all, to be honest. Especially because the sunglasses are also not very Tom Ford too. Let's look at the tie. They've got a leather tie here. The really wide coat silhouette with the wide purple trousers. That's also a color that Haider likes to use. Okay, so we've got the tailoring in different colors with the gloves. These dresses with this really aggressive slit. I guess what Haider was channeling, which is why it goes all the way up to damn near your waist. And it's interesting because Haider talks about having a more romantic sensibility when it comes to showing a sexiness and stuff like that. But then the slit literally goes this high, but then at the same time everything else is covered. You know, it's it's long sleeve, sorry. Interesting contrast that Haider Ackermann has used there. Someone said, Jesus, that's a lot of bone. 2 seasons ago, every brand was doing ties as a theme of a trend. Is that a trend? I don't know. Like, wasn't it the other day that, someone said very Halston. It's interesting you mentioned Halston, because Halston is someone that I know Tom Ford has talked about as being like someone that he has referenced and someone that he's interested in. And Haider Ackermann has also said that Halston is someone that he's influenced by. So that's a really good take, because I can imagine that, you know, it is very Halston coded. I can see that for sure. And it's someone that both of them are inspired by. So yeah, that's definitely a good take. I agree with that. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, we have these kind of different iterations of the same silhouettes, whether it's like one sleeve long, one sleeve short, yada yada yada. So this look is very interesting because it reminds me of one of the collections that Haider Ackermann cited that he was a fan of from Tom Ford. I think it SLP Fall Winter 2001. This sort of like fringe. Although I like what they've done. This is kind of, I don't know what fabric. It looks kind of mohair, kind of. I don't really know what they've used here, but it really looks cool. But point being, this is something that Tom Ford has done. So this is like a very Tom Ford reference. Like a very clear Tom Ford reference. Like a very, very clear Tom Ford reference. More of the same. This once again is it's funny. Do you know what this reminds me of actually? When I saw this reminded me of like a really famous, like, let me show you guys, like Princess Diana look. So Princess Diana has this like really famous like dress that I think is absolutely iconic, and it's velvet, and it's velvet. It has like these tuxedo lapels, like the very sharp peak lapels that you would see with tuxedos, and it's like really, it has this like really aggressive like figure 8 shape. The pearls are beautiful. They're like, I don't know if they're actually real diamonds, but they're like diamond encrusted around and stuff. A lot of designers do this thing where they kind of do the same thing, where it's like a dress with like these sort of tuxedo-esque collars, and then they use these like lapels for like different things. And every time I see these kind of looks, it reminds me of her Princess Diana, like every single time. Let's see. One of the things I would have liked to see more often from Haider was a focus on textures. Yeah, I said that earlier, but yeah, I agree with you. Because that's what he's known for. Like, that is Haider. Like, let's see crazy ass textures just all over the place. I think there's too much leather. However, it's a debut collection. So once again, it's one collection. Haider Ackermann, hopefully, is going to be at Tom Ford for a really long time. And so I think in this collection, it could be leather. In a different collection, it could be, you know, a different fabric. So I think I'm not too, even though, yes, I would like to see more play with textures, and I didn't really get that itch scratched in this collection. I think that it's something that we'll definitely see in future collections by Haider Ackermann at Tom Ford for sure. I definitely think we're going to see that. Yeah, this dress I think is one of the dresses I like the least in this collection. I don't know about the silhouette. The silhouette looks a bit odd. Does anyone know why Peter Hawkings left? Apparently, I talked about this earlier when we first started the live stream. Apparently, Tom Ford and Peter Hawkings had like they weren't agreeing on certain things, and Tom Ford like thought that he wasn't representing Tom Ford's like idea of sensuality properly. So that's why they parted ways. But it's kind of weird because obviously before he became the creative director, like I've said earlier, Peter Hawkins was Tom Ford's right hand for years. Like Peter Hawkins has been working for Tom Ford for so long. For them to like be friends and to have a relationship built over years and years, and all of a sudden it all just breaks down, it's crazy. I feel like there's more to that story that I don't know about. But yeah, like I definitely think that there's definitely more to the story for sure. Yeah, exactly. He had worked with him for over 25 years. Like Peter Hawkins has been with Tom Ford since, was it like Gucci? I think he has been with Tom Ford since the Gucci days. So like he's been with Tom Ford for a long time, like a really long time. And for you to be with someone, you know, for that long and everything to just end in flames like that is quite sad, actually. It's quite sad. It's quite sad. Yeah, people in the chat are saying since Gucci. Yeah, exactly. So it's really sad. But yeah, that's from my understanding what happened. Yeah, Tom Ford didn't really like the collection that he did, and they had a lot of disagreements, and it led to, you know, their whole relationship breaking down. So yeah, sad. I hope they become friends again, because that's quite sad, to be honest. Luke said he's not a great dressmaker, never has been. Are you talking about Haider? I mean, this dress, for example, if I'm being critical, because once again, I'm a Haider fanboy, and as you guys can tell, I really like this collection. However, if I'm going to be really critical, I do think that this silhouette of the dress was not that great. It does look a bit frumpy, and I think it actually, in a collection that I thought was sensational, it was one of the weaker links of this collection, for sure. So yeah, this dress, I don't know, but wasn't the biggest fan. Which obviously doesn't bode well, because one of the reasons why Haider Ackermann was hired at Tom Ford is because they're trying to build the women's wear side of Tom Ford and make that side of Tom Ford bigger. And I just don't think you're going to do it with dresses that look like this, for sure. I don't think that's going to happen personally. Because first of all, it's too tight. Like, this model is a size 0 and her tits are pressing up against the dress. So if it was anyone who is basically not a size, you can't wear it. And it looks too tight even for someone that's a size 0. Like, it just doesn't look nice. Like, it honestly doesn't look nice. And the whole reason why models are size 0s is because, you know, apparently things look better on, you know, hangers. Like, it's supposed to mimic how clothing looks on a hanger. And if things are like scrunching up like this at the armpits, that does not bode well at all from a dressmaking perspective. Yeah, it does have an open back. I did see the open back. I wonder if it's adjustable, because like in the runway video, you could see that it has an open back, because if it's adjustable, I guess that's what makes the fit better. But if it is adjustable, they should have adjusted it properly before sending it on the runway, because then it wouldn't look like that, right? Okay, let's go on. This is more of the sexiness that Haider Ackermann is bringing, with the belt detail, with the, you know, the tuxedo lapels, but then also bare-chested, this sort of shirt, but it's open here. I like the styling of it, though. I like the way that's styled, for sure. That's really cool. Obviously, the cropped jacket that I was talking about earlier, where this is a lot of stuff that's going to be pushed via their women's wear side. You can't say you want sexy and then idealize clothes that don't have bodies inside them, because it's easier to design for a hanger. Bruh, I'm not talking about myself. That's what people in fashion say. That's why people use size 0 models. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about that's why the industry standard is. I literally didn't say if I agree with it or disagree. I'm just saying that's the rationale that people use to explain why, you know, that's the reason why people use size 0 models. Oh, okay, you're saying in general, not me. Okay, fair enough. Because sometimes, like, I'm not saying that you do this, because obviously, like, you clarify that you're not talking about me, but sometimes I will say things and I say it in a general sense, and then people like put that opinion on top of my head and they're like, you said, and I'm like, I didn't actually say that. I said that that's the reason why that happens. I didn't say that I necessarily agree with that, or I think things should be that way, but people don't like listen. I don't know why. I genuinely think, no, but it's true. Like, I think people have like comprehension issues. Like, you know, we talk about this all the time, right? I think comprehension is at an all-time low, especially online, because like we're in a time now where people read articles. They don't even read like the words in an article. They just read a headline. And they're like, oh my God, they don't even read the article. They just read a headline. So the same thing, like I might say something and people are like, you know, oh, you said this. And it's like, your comprehension is low. And I know Micah's laughing because sometimes we look at the comments under some of my videos and like people will like put like this exact thing, like people will put things that I say on top of my head when I didn't actually say that for myself. And they say that I said that, and it's like, your comprehension skills are very, very low, like extremely low. This look would seem to be a fan favorite. A lot of people did like these looks at the end. Like this look too was a look that made the rounds on social media. I wonder if we're going to see this. We're probably going to see this across a few red carpets, to be honest. But yeah, solid collection. That is my review on Haider Ackermann's Tom Ford debut. I thought it was solid. I think that there are many things that moving forward I still want to see. I definitely want to see him play with more textures. I want to see different ways that he uses color also. So yeah, we'll see. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.